نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. So the purpose of this video is to clarify a few masail of zakat. So the first issue is who must pay zakat. A person who owns the nisab for zakat. What is the nisab? Nisab, it can be calculated on gold or it can be calculated on silver, but the fuqaha today base it on the value of silver. So anybody who owns the equivalent value of $52.5 of silver, which is 563 grams approximately of silver, which in the UK in June 2017 at the time of this video is approximately 300 British pounds. So if a person owns that wealth or more, then they must pay zakat on the whole amount, and that is 2.5% of the whole amount. Who is eligible to receive zakat? A person who owns less than this nisab. So a person who owns less than the value of $52.5 of silver, 563 grams of silver, or 300 British pounds. If a person has less wealth than this, then they can receive zakat. Now, we often pay our zakat to the third world, to our relatives and friends. But we must first check, do they have this amount of wealth? Because it's not a lot of money. Owning 300 pounds of wealth doesn't make you rich. It's still, you could still be very, very poor, but unfortunately you cannot receive zakat. So, even an individual who might own one gold bangle, the value of that could very, very easily reach 300 pounds or more, and therefore they cannot receive zakat. However, if they are a family, their children could possibly receive zakat. But these issues must be ascertained before zakat is paid. Why? Because the onus is upon the individual to ensure that his duty and obligation and fard of paying zakat is fulfilled. So I call this due diligence, that when you pay zakat, ensure that it is going to the correct place as much as possible. Of course, there are certain things which you can't control, but what is in your control and within your remit, you must at least make those inquiries. Now, the types of wealth upon which zakat is paid, there are three types. I'm going to mention two. There is male saman and male tijarat. Male saman means the personal wealth that we have, any currency, money, gold, silver, personal belongings, that kind of thing. That is the first thing that zakat is paid on. And the second type of wealth that zakat is paid on is male tijarat, which is that wealth or those items which have been acquired for the purposes of trade, selling, and so on and so forth. So if you have owned those male saman, the personal wealth, or male tijarat, the trade wealth, for a year or more, remember that's the condition, that ownership must have been had for a year. Once you have had ownership for a year, then zakat at 2.5% of the total amount is payable. Now, with respect to your personal wealth, what is exempt from zakat are those items which fall under zaruriyat, your necessities and essentials. This includes the house that you live in, the clothes that you wear. Now, you could live in a very expensive house, you could be wearing very expensive clothes, but you do not pay zakat on that. Cutlery, crockery, items of electronic items and machinery in the household, all of these things which are for usage do not accrue zakat. You do not need to pay zakat on any of these items. If you have money and cash saved in the bank, which you have had over the course of 1 year or more, you must pay zakat on that. Gold and silver, you must pay zakat on that. You do not have to pay zakat upon gems. So you might have diamonds worth hundreds and thousands of pounds, or rubies, or other gems. You do not have to pay zakat upon that. Now, of course, I'm not going to give you an extensive list of what you can and cannot pay zakat on, or rather, should I say, what you must or must not pay zakat upon. However, this gives us a general idea. A question I often have is, I have a mortgage on my house, do I need to pay zakat? Well, if it's the house that you live in, then whether you have a mortgage or not, you don't pay zakat, because it falls under the essentials. This leads on to, well, a person who has multiple properties. They have the property that they live in, but they now have acquired other properties. Do they pay zakat on that? Well, the first question is, what is the intention that those properties have been bought with? If it's been the intention that I'm going to buy these properties for the purposes of selling them a year, 2 years, 10 years down the line and make a profit on them, then they will be counted as malet tijarat, trade mal, and therefore zakat will be payable on those properties, the additional properties, after you have owned them for a year. If, however, you have bought a property for the purposes of rental, then you will not pay zakat on the actual property itself. What you will pay zakat on is the rental income. So once you receive the rental income from the house and you have owned that for a year or more, then you will pay zakat on it. If, for example, you haven't owned that rental income for a year because as it comes you have spent it, then you do not pay zakat upon that either. Now, so that addresses this issue of having properties on rent. And also I've mentioned about a mortgage. Now, what about that scenario where a person has bought a house to sell on, but he has a mortgage on that house? Then he has to pay zakat upon that property after a year, but he has a debt outstanding. And when we calculate zakat, the way it is calculated is that you total up all your assets and wealth that zakat is payable upon. You then subtract any loans that you owe. Therefore, the mortgage would be considered as a loan and would be subtracted, and therefore you would pay zakat upon the balance. Likewise, I often get questioned on student loans, that various people have personal and student loans. The underlying matter here is that when we pay zakat, we total up everything we must pay zakat on, and then we subtract any loans. So hypothetically, you have totaled up £10,000 worth of wealth upon which you must pay zakat, but you now have £5,000 of loans. You owe personally a few people, or you owe the bank, or there is a mortgage, or there is a student loan, whatever it may be. And the value of that, hypothetically, is £5,000. We subtract £5,000 from £10,000, that leaves us with £5,000, and therefore zakat will be payable on the 5,000, not the 10,000. I live with my parents. That's another issue. I live with my parents, so I don't need to pay zakat. Wrong. Zakat is wajib upon every individual who is aqil, baligh, and of course is a Muslim and owns at least the minimum amount of wealth, which is the nisab of 563 grams of silver, or £300. Whether you live with your parents or not makes no difference. If you have come to puberty, if you are of sound mind, and you own wealth to the value of £300 or more and have done for a year or more, then you must pay zakat upon that. So if you don't have any additional money to pay that zakat with, you're not earning hypothetically, but you have savings, then you must pay from that savings. Or you are not earning, but you have gold which is greater than the value of £300. So you have no source of income in which to pay the zakat with. Then you must pay from that value of gold. You must take out some of that gold and use it to fulfill your zakat. Again, this answers this other question that I often get, is that I don't have a job, but I do own gold and silver. Do I still need to pay zakat? And as I've just answered, if the value of that gold or silver is £300 minimum, then yes, you must still pay zakat. You are not exempt upon that. So these are certain issues that I wanted to clarify with respect to zakat. Remember, anything which you have owned for the purposes of trade, so let's say a goldsmith, a jeweler's, a person who trades in gold, they buy gold and they use it, they sell it. Zakat would be payable upon that gold after it has been sat with that jeweler for a year. If he has bought and sold, therefore that the ownership of that gold has been changing hands throughout the year, then zakat is not payable upon it. It is only payable upon that part of the gold which he has had ownership of for a year or more. I hope this clarifies some of the issues. There are many, many, many other issues, but these are just a few that I thought I'd include in this video. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon His and His Rasul's Sharia. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.